Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Multifamily Talks. I'm Krista Hurley, Industry Principal at RealPage, and today we're talking about something every multifamily operator strives for, but few truly master: resident loyalty. Resident loyalty isn't built through one exceptional interaction. It's earned over hundreds of everyday moments, from how quickly maintenance responds to the accuracy of a monthly statement to simply following through on the commitments made to residents every day. So on this episode, we'll explore what really drives resident loyalty, why operational consistency matters more than ever, and how technology and AI are helping operators deliver on the promises that matter most. I'm excited to be joined by two fantastic guests. First up, Matt Brown, Director of Product Operation, who brings deep product and industry expertise helping operators rethink resident experience through technology. And joining us from Summit Property Management is Sarah Covington, Operator Specialist, who leads those efforts every day and brings a customer perspective on what it actually takes to earn resident trust across the portfolio. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us, Krista.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. So let's start with the big picture, guys, because resident loyalty means something different than it did even 5 years ago. Matt, from an industry perspective, has the definition of resident loyalty evolved?
I think the biggest shift is that loyalty isn't something that happens just at renewal anymore. It's something that's built every single day, like you said, leading up to the renewal, and dare I say, at the time of move-in. You know, years ago, we tended to think of loyalty as, did they renew their lease? And that was it. Today, it's really about trust. Residents have more choices, more information, more transparency than ever before, and all at their fingertips. You know, they're reading reviews, they're talking to their friends and current residents and comparing those experiences long before they even sign a lease, let alone a renewal. And I think that communities that earn loyalty are the ones that consistently keep the promises that they make. So whether that's responding to maintenance quickly, communicating proactively, or simply making sure a resident's statement is accurate, those everyday moments build confidence over time. So residents don't renew just because of one amazing experience. They renew because the experience they expected is the experience they consistently received.
So, Sarah, how does that align with what you're seeing across your communities? Like, what does resident loyalty look like at Summit?
It definitely aligns completely. We stopped measuring loyalty by renewal rate alone a while back because by the time someone's deciding whether to renew, the outcome is already baked in. It was decided months earlier in a dozen small interactions they may not even remember individually. For us, loyalty shows up as residents who don't shop around when their lease comes up. They don't even open the apartment finder apps. That only happens when they've stopped wondering whether we'll follow through and start assuming it.
So, Matt, one thing that we often hear is that residents don't expect perfection. They expect consistency, like you mentioned. So why has operational consistency become such an important competitive advantage?
You know, I actually love that phrase because I think it's exactly right. Things are going to happen. An AC is going to go out, a heating element in a dryer is going to wear over time, and ultimately a package is going to get misplaced. That's apartment living. You know, that's life. What residents remember isn't necessarily the problem. They remember how the problem was handled. So were they kept informed? Did someone follow through? Did they feel like they mattered? Consistency removes uncertainty. And when residents know what kind of experience they're going to receive every single time that they interact with the site teams, that's where trust starts to form.
I love that. Consistency removes uncertainty. So Sarah, what are some of those everyday promises that your teams focus on delivering that ultimately build that resident's trust?
Honestly, I go back to it's as simple as if you say you're going to do something, just do it. Like Nike says. We hold our teams closely to responding to every maintenance request, even if it's just to say, we have it, and here is when we are going to come. Then following through with that promise. If a resident raises something, someone circles back to confirm it's resolved, and not just resolves it in the system. We always have to do everything in our power to close that loop.
True story. So let's talk about maintenance, because that is probably one of the most visible resident experiences. So Matt, from your perspective, industry-wide, why does maintenance have such an outsized impact on loyalty?
You know, maintenance is probably the most universal shared resident experience. You know, not every resident is going to use a fitness center. Not everyone attends resident events, and not everyone hangs out at the bark park. But eventually, almost every resident will need to submit a maintenance request. So it's one of the clearest moments where a property either delivers on its promise or they don't. And one thing that I found really interesting in Jay Turner's The Next Gen Renter research is that millennials have what they call a just fix it mindset. So whereas deferred maintenance isn't viewed as a minor inconvenience, it's really interpreted as the property not caring enough to address the issue.
That's huge.
So that's why maintenance has such an outsized impact. It's not just fixing something, it's demonstrating that you're invested in the residents' well-being in their home.
Yeah, that's huge. So Sarah, over to you. How have the teams worked to improve that experience at Summit, and what have your residents responded to?
We tend to put a lot of focus on the update and not just the fix. Residents will tend to forgive those repairs that take 2 days if they know that it's going to take 2 days. What we heard consistently in resident feedback was just frustration with the period of silence between the request and the technician actually showing up. So we built in automatic status updates at each stage, and we coach techs to leave a quick note or even knock when they're just checking on a part. Residents responded to that almost more than the faster repair itself.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like that with Charter Spectrum, our internet provider. When they give you that window of time, I'm like, thank you for that. That's generous. So beyond maintenance, billing accuracy and transparency are also becoming increasingly important. Matt, why is that such an important part of resident experience?
Krista, every resident expects to pay rent. What they don't expect are surprises. So that's hidden fees, confusing charges, inaccurate balances. Like those missteps create doubt. And once trust around money is damaged, it's incredibly difficult to rebuild. Also, another Jay Turner report actually found that financial clarity becomes more important the longer someone lives in a community. So that's a great reminder that what attracts a resident isn't always what retains them. Financial interactions have become relationship moments. Again, transparency builds trust.
So on that financial topic, Sarah, have you found that simply communicating proactively about their, rents, even when there's not an immediate solution for things, changes the resident's perspective?
Every time. Some of our highest satisfaction scores actually come from situations where nothing has been resolved yet. The residents need to be told things up front where they never have to ask. The moment a resident must come to us to find out what is going on, we've already lost some of that trust, regardless of how the issue eventually is resolved.
Yeah, that's so true. So residents experience the property as one brand most of the time. They don't separate leasing, maintenance, and resident services into different departments quite like we do. So Matt, why is creating a connected operational experience becoming so important?
That's a great point. Residents should experience one brand. They don't think in departments like we do in the multifamily industry. They don't care whether leasing owns the issue, maintenance owns it, your third-party vendor, Larry, or if it's the corporate office that's owning the issue. If leasing promises one thing, maintenance says something different, and then the on-site management team sends a conflicting message, that's a frustrating experience from the resident's perspective. Now, I do think technology gives operators an opportunity to connect those teams so the resident experience seems seamless. It seems like one brand instead of 3 disconnected ones.
Where have you seen that in practice, Sarah? Like, where's that connected experience made the biggest difference for your residents?
For us, I would say move-in is the biggest one. A resident might get a promise from a leasing about a unit feature, timeline, level of floor the unit is on. And if maintenance or the manager doesn't know that this promise was made, it seems to fall apart pretty quickly. We've worked to make sure notes and commitments follow the resident across departments instead of just living in someone's inbox. The other place is delinquency and billing questions, overlapping with the maintenance issues. A resident is going to get frustrated about a repair, but then they're going to get an unrelated late notice with absolutely no context. It reads as the property's not really paying attention. By connecting those workflows so one team knows what another promised has cut down on that kind of friction quite a bit.
So we've been talking a lot about that resident sentiment, their experience, the on-site team. Let's introduce technology because operators have more data than ever before. And Matt, I want to know, where are you seeing operators leverage technology to improve the resident loyalty, not just operational efficiency?
I'd say operators seeing the biggest success aren't just becoming more efficient. They're actually becoming more intentional. They're using technology, like you said, to communicate sooner, identify issues earlier, to Sarah's point, and remove friction from everyday experiences. You know, residents don't wake up hoping to use another app. They wake up hoping that everything simply works. And I say technology is at its best when it quietly makes the resident experience feel effortless, literally from log in to log out.
Yeah. So from your perspective, Sarah, which technology investments have made the biggest impact on the resident experience?
I feel like the tools that gave our site teams visibility more than the ones that added a new resident-facing feature. Being able to see a resident's full history from the moment they call in has changed how personal our teams can be, even with staff turnover. The other one is automated proactive communication. Not more notifications just for the sake of it or because we felt like it, but it's because of the right update at that right moment without having to try and remember to send it.
Right. Right. So, and talking about sending a reminder or something, AI is becoming a much bigger part of this conversation. And this is definitely where my world enters in the conversation. But Matt, where do you think AI creates the greatest opportunity to strengthen resident relationships?
You know, I think AI gives us an opportunity to give the site team something that's incredibly valuable. That's time. You know, every repetitive question that AI can answer from another source is another minute an on-site team member gets to spend helping out a resident who's frustrated or welcoming a new resident with white glove service. I mean, creating buzz around upcoming resident events is another way to create community, right? So AI shouldn't replace relationships. It should create more opportunities to deepen and strengthen them.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So how have your teams embraced AI while still maintaining the personal relationships that residents expect?
You know, we were really careful about where we let AI sit in the resident journey. It handles that repetitive front door pricing questions, availability, simple account questions. So our leasing and service teams aren't spending their day on things a resident could get answers to in seconds. That's freed our teams up to actually prevent for the harder conversations. A resident who's upset, a maintenance issue that's dragging, a lease renewal conversation. AI took work off their plate. It didn't take the relationship away. Our teams are still pushed to fully embrace it as we spread the message that AI will be like a mini assistant.
I need a mini assistant. Oh, wait, I do.
We all do.
Yeah. It's AI.
It's AI.
So, Matt, one thing AI does enable is more proactive communication, like you had mentioned earlier, instead of that reactive type of service. How important is that shift?
I mean, it's huge. One phrase I use a lot is silence creates anxiety, clear communication creates confidence. So residents don't always expect an immediate solution, especially if the issue is complex, but they almost always appreciate knowing someone is working on it. Even a quick update, like Sarah mentioned earlier, hey, we're here, we're working on it, drastically changes how people perceive the experience.
Yeah. And so, Sarah, how have residents noticed the difference when communication becomes more timely and consistent?
Yes, and it shows up in resident satisfaction and in how our residents talk to our teams. We've seen so many fewer frustrated follow-up calls because residents aren't left guessing and reaching out repeatedly for a status update. Even our team members have noticed a shift and the tone of the conversations. Residents are coming in already informed instead of already annoyed.
That is a big difference. So Matt, when operators often worry about automation replacing the human element, how do you see AI supporting associates rather than replacing them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions around AI, especially in our industry. You know, the goal isn't fewer conversations, it's actually better conversations. J. Turner research shows that renters are perfectly comfortable using chat box for things like pricing and availability, which Sarah said has given time back to her teams. But when they're dealing with maintenance issues or financial questions, maybe it's security concerns or just specific leasing questions, 85% still want to speak to a real person. So AI should handle repetitive work, but people should handle empathy. And I mean, to our point today, that's where loyalty is built.
Yeah, for sure. So Sarah, how has AI actually allowed your on-site teams to spend more time building relationships instead of answering the repetitive questions, which like you said?
So a property manager who used to spend a good chunk of the day answering those same handfuls of questions is now spending that time walking the property, checking in with their residents face to face, or getting ahead of an issue before it becomes a complaint. The shift that we've seen from that reactive to available has been one of the biggest quality of life changes for our teams too, not just for our residents.
So Matt, where do you see resident expectations heading over the next several years?
That's a good question. I actually don't think the current state of resident expectations are becoming unreasonable. They just want more transparency. I mean, Krista and Sarah, think about it. Residents compare their apartment experience to every other experience that they have day to day. You know, Amazon tells them exactly where their package is.
Love that.
Airlines notify them before a delay.
Got a delay today.
Domino's Pizza lets them know each step of that baking process. And, you know, banks communicate suspicious activity in real time. Residents increasingly expect that same transparency and responsiveness from the place that they call home. I know that they want to see their apartment life more integrated into their daily life. And I think that's what we'll start to see within the next 5 years. And I don't even think we have to wait for the next 5 years. I think that wave is already shifting.
Sorry to hear.
Completely agree.
Yeah, so how are you preparing your teams for those changing expectations?
We are trying to train teams to think about transparency as a habit and not necessarily a policy. Something like communicate before they have to ask instead of wait until they ask, then respond well. That's a mindset shift more than a technology one. Also, we're trying to make sure teams have the tools and the authority to actually update residents in real time. Instead of needing to check back in with somebody or let me call my boss really quick before I can do that. At this point, they can say or do anything with the correct authority to do so.
So if operators could improve just one area tomorrow that would have the greatest impact on resident loyalty, where do you think it would be?
I'd improve follow through. We spend a lot of time making promises, but yet we spend less time confirming those promises were actually delivered. It's really very simple. Here's an example. Following up after a maintenance request, checking that the resident is satisfied, and then closing out that communication loop. Those sound like really small things, but over time, those interactions, they become the difference between a resident feeling like a unit number and actually feeling like someone genuinely cares.
Yeah, that's a lot like what you mentioned earlier, Sarah. So what advice would you give other operators who are trying to improve their resident retention through better resident experiences?
I would definitely start with following through. Start with the follow through before you start with anything flashy. It is tempting to invest in the visible things right now, especially with how big AI is growing. But if the basics aren't consistent, none of that will move the needle. And when you do start layering in automation or AI, start with the invisible stuff, routing, status updates, follow-ups. That's what's actually made our promise reliable before residents ever noticed AI was involved at all. And once all of that is in place, look into adding resident rewards programs to enhance the positive behaviors that communities would like to see.
I love that. So, and finally, I would love to hear from each of you the magic wand question that I always ask. What's the one thing that you hope our audience takes away from today's conversation?
I definitely think you should take away that consistency is a strategy, not just an operational nice to have. It's easy to treat the small stuff like a maintenance update or an accurate statement as background noise compared to bigger retention initiatives. You know, those small moments are the retention strategy. Our automation and AI journey didn't just start as the resident experience initiative. It started as an operations fix. It just turned out that those two ended up being the same thing.
If there's one thing I'd leave everyone with today, it's this. Resident loyalty isn't built through extraordinary moments. It's simply built through ordinary moments repeated consistently. Every maintenance request, every billing statement, every phone call, follow-up, every resident interaction, every promise that you keep. Those moments build trust. And trust is ultimately what drives renewals, referrals, reputation, and long-term success.
I'm having kind of like a full circle moment because we did a Multifamily Talks earlier this year with Melanie Frentz and Marissa Nunez on the retention playbook, essentially. So it starts with all of this is what they ended up saying in that Multifamily Talks. Well, thank you guys so much for joining today's conversation. I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is that we need to remember to get back to the basics, the consistent open communication that'll build loyalty and keep those promises. And thank you everyone for joining Multifamily Talks. Before we go, I would like to say if these types of conversations that you're interested in, be sure to join us at Real World, where we'll continue exploring the future of AI, operational strategy, resident retention and resident satisfaction, and connected multifamily technology with leaders from across the industry, including myself, Matt, and Sarah. They'll be there. So thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you next time on Multifamily Talks.